Welcome to the Talk Like a Leader podcast, where we explore the mindset, skill set, and habit set of leadership communication. Using these tips, techniques, and tactics, you'll be able to talk like a leader to build better relationships and get more done. Your host is Guy Harris, who has more than 20 years of combined professional and military experience in consulting, coaching, and training in areas like team and interaction dynamics, communication strategies and tactics, as well as emotional intelligence. Take it away, Guy.
Hi, this is Guy Harris. Welcome to the Talk Like a Leader podcast. This week's episode is about communication blind spots that can be intensified by remote work. And when we are face-to-face with people, we get visual reminders and clues. We get to see their body language change or their facial expressions change or their tone change when we're having a conversation. And it can help us to stay more mindful of our communication blind spots because we get regular reinforcement when we stumble into them and create a negative response in other people. Now, the challenge with working remotely, which so many of us are doing right now, is that we miss those frequent reminders. And because we're working alone a great deal of the time, it's easy to get deeper and deeper into our own blind spots because a blind spot is something that's probably pretty comfortable to you. And because it's comfortable to you, you're not necessarily aware that the behavior or the interaction pattern causes a problem for other people. Or if not a direct problem for other people, that it somehow interferes with the effectiveness of your communication. I'll start by giving an example of something I did recently that really highlighted my attention to this issue. I received an email from a customer about a problem they were having with our DISC assessment site. And it was a pretty involved explanation to try to fully address this person's concern. And they had actually asked for a phone call. Well, because of various timing constraints and things like that, I wasn't really in a position to make a phone call right at that moment, although I would have time later in the day. And as I was writing this email, I was getting deeper and deeper in the rabbit hole trying to explain the issue that was probably easy to explain on the phone and difficult to explain in email. Well, here's the reason that happened. I have a lot of cautious traits. My natural tendency is to revert to written replies or to frankly, avoid interaction with people. Not because I don't like people or not because I don't realize I need to interact with people. It's just frankly more comfortable for me to not interact with people. And because it's comfortable, if I can find an easy way to not interact and achieve my objective, I'll probably go there if I'm not mindful and aware and reminding myself that that's not necessarily the most effective way to do things. Basically, it takes work for me to remember to interact with others. That happens to be my blind spot. Other people have different blind spots. So as I'm getting deeper and deeper down this rabbit trail of this email, I realize, in about 45 minutes, I could just pick up the phone and call this person, and it would be dealt with and would be done in probably 3 or 4 minutes, and I've already spent 10 minutes trying to draft this email. So actually, the most effective and efficient and fastest solution would be to pick up the phone. It's just not the first thing I think of. I have to remind myself because creating interaction with others happens to be my blind spot. Well, that's the thing I have to remind myself about, to reach out to people, to engage with people, to connect with people, to initiate connection. That's my blind spot. I have to constantly work to overcome it and remind myself not to let this remote work environment draw me deeper into that hole. Well, it turns out that other people have blind spots too. Let me share some things for you to consider. If you have lots of dominant traits, if you're outgoing and task-oriented, then your tendency to want to get things done and check it off your list could lead you to very short, direct sentences in email that from the reader's perspective sounds aggressive. In your desire to just get it off your list, you could sound like you're angry or you're trying to back the other person into a corner, even if you don't mean to. So, personal dominant traits, beware of the short, direct sentences that might, to another person, sound aggressive or like you're angry. Because if you don't want to send that message, then don't. Personal with inspiring traits, one of the things that remote work can drive you to is maybe this desire to engage with people and tell stories. And maybe your emails have long stories at the beginning, or maybe when you get on the phone because you've been working alone or working isolated from your coworkers, maybe your conversation drifts a little too far into the storytelling and relational connection. I'm not suggesting that a little bit of telling the story of what happened this weekend or sharing your experience with others is a bad thing. In fact, I happen to think it's probably a pretty good thing for creating good team dynamic and creating relationships on a team. Just beware that because you don't naturally get that, and maybe because you're desiring it so much by working alone, that you don't turn the whole business conversation into a personal conversation. Just a word to the wise, something to look out for. Personal with supportive trait, a thing to look out for is reading too much into the messages other people send you. Beware of over-interpreting tone. Remember that email actually doesn't have a tone. Now, for the person composing a message, we also have to remember that email doesn't have a tone, and we have to be super careful not to come across as negative or judgmental. It's just one of the challenges of written communication. And a warning for people with supportive trait is to remember that just because an email is short doesn't mean the other person's angry. Just because they didn't ask about your family or share something personal doesn't necessarily mean that they're frustrated or that they don't care about you. Now, I don't know that people with supportive trait will necessarily interpret things that way. What I'm suggesting is it's a potential blind spot for you to look out for. So beware of reading emails, messages as more intense or more aggressive than the sender intended them. And I've already shared the cautious person's blind spot. It's mine. Beware of a tendency that can turn into writing messages that should be spoken messages. Beware of isolating from people when you should initiate contact. This is not intended to be critical or judgmental. The key is that we all have blind spots. And one of the things we can do when we're working remotely and we don't have direct feedback from each other in lots of face-to-face conversation, we can use video chat. We can use phone calls to help bridge that gap. Even that's not as good as a real face-to-face. It takes more work to set up. It takes more effort. And sometimes we don't get all of the richness of communication, even with those methods that we get in face-to-face. So my warning is this: become aware of and sensitive to your own blind spots and look out for them. Remote work might actually make you go deeper into your blind spot, so beware. And also remember that other people have blind spots, and remote work is probably pushing them deeper in their blind spot as well. So when you're interacting with a coworker who doesn't share the blind spot you have, what I'm going to suggest is maybe offer them a little bit of grace, because maybe they're struggling too. So for this week, my encouragement is this: become aware of and sensitive to your own blind spots. Take action to stop yourself from drifting too far into them. And also, cut other people some slack. Remember that they don't necessarily mean for it to come across the way it comes across. That there could be some things about the remote work environment that make the differences in your communication style worse or more aggravating or more frustrating. And cut people some slack. Have some grace. Have some understanding for the fact that they also might be feeling some stress and might be driven farther into their blind spot. If you can be aware of blind spots, both yours and others, you can talk like a leader. This has been the Talk Like a Leader podcast. You can listen to this show every week wherever you get your podcast. If you haven't, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm Guy Harris, and thanks for listening.